If you've ever lived in the old part of a big city, you know that quiet doesn't really exist. It's replaced by a constant hum, the buzz of scooters, vendors shouting, dogs barking at things only they can see. Delhi's old city had that kind of noise, alive even after midnight. I'd lived there most of my life, in a weather-stained two-bedroom flat above a grocery shop, with a balcony that looked out over tangled power lines and cracked rooftops. My mother and I moved there after my father died. She refused to leave, saying the noise made her feel less alone. We had learned to live with the small inconveniences, the unreliable tap water, the power cuts that came without warning. During summer, the electricity could vanish for hours, the air turning heavy and still. You'd sweat, fan yourself with an old newspaper, and wait. It was part of life. That night felt no different at first. It was mid-July, sticky and airless. The city had been teasing us with rain for days, but none came. My mother had gone to bed early, her body worn down by the heat. I stayed up late working on my laptop, a freelance project I'd promised to finish. Around 11:40, the lights flickered once, twice, then died. Everything went black. I sighed, saved what I could, and closed the laptop. I'd been through this enough times to know what came next. A long wait, mosquitoes, and the strange hollow quiet that fills a home when all the machines stop. I lit a candle and sat by the window. Outside, most of the buildings were dark, their outlines faint under the moonlight. I could hear someone coughing on a nearby balcony, a dog whining. But then somewhere below, a gate creaked, metal against metal. I leaned closer to the window, listening. Slow footsteps followed, deliberate ones too steady to belong to someone just passing through. The corridor outside our flat wasn't long, but every sound carried in it. I told myself it was a neighbor, maybe someone checking the breaker box. But the steps stopped right outside our door. Then came a faint rustling, as if someone brushed against the wall. I held my breath. Nothing. I waited a full minute before whispering to myself, probably nothing. That's when I saw the curtain move. A slow, steady sway from the balcony, the kind that happens when someone's standing just behind it. I froze. My first thought was that the wind had picked up, but there was no wind, not even a hint of a breeze. I could see the flame of the candle beside me, standing perfectly still. Then the outline appeared, a man's shape, tall, lean, framed against the dim light coming from the street below. "Mom," I whispered. She stirred in her room, her voice groggy. "Annika, what is it?" "Someone's on the balcony." By the time she reached the doorway, her eyes wide, the man moved, a half step forward, out of the shadow. I could just make out his face, hollow cheeks, dark eyes, unshaven. His shirt clung to him with sweat and his bare feet were covered in dust. My mother's hand clutched the door frame. "Who's that?" He raised both hands slowly. "Please don't scream." His voice was soft, exhausted. "I just need water." I grabbed my phone out of instinct. No signal. The blackout must have taken the cell tower down too. "Stay there," I said, trying to sound calm. "Don't move." "I won't," he said quietly. "I'm not here to hurt anyone." His tone wasn't threatening. It was desperate. I reached for the nearest thing I could find, an old umbrella, and pointed it toward him like a weapon. "How did you get in here?" "The door," he said simply. "It wasn't locked." That didn't make sense. I'd locked it before bed. I knew I had. My mother whispered, "Annika, give him water and let him go." I didn't move at first. My hands were shaking. Then slowly I picked up a plastic bottle from the counter, twisted the cap off and slid it toward him across the floor. He took it, keeping his distance, and drank in long, trembling gulps. When he finished, he wiped his mouth and whispered, "Thank you." I tried to keep my voice steady. "Who are you?" He hesitated. "Doesn't matter. I won't come back." He turned toward the balcony door. Just before stepping out, he looked back at me. "You shouldn't leave your door unlocked." Then he was gone, swallowed by the dark. The power came back around 4:30 a.m., humming through the ceiling fan in the fridge. I didn't sleep a minute. When the first pale light of dawn crept through the window, I finally went to check the door. My mother followed close behind, still shaken but silent. The latch was broken, not forced from the outside, but bent from within as if someone had wedged it open quietly, using something thin and precise. I felt sick. "He didn't lie," I whispered. My mother sat down at the table, pressing her palms together. "Whoever he was, he could have done worse." That thought haunted me the rest of the day. I called the landlord first. He sounded half asleep and irritated. "Annika, it's an old building. Latches break. I'll send someone in a few days." "A few days?" I repeated. "Someone broke in," he sighed. "Nothing's been stolen, right? It's probably one of those drifters from the railway colony. Keep the balcony locked." That was the kind of answer you got here, in a calm dismissal. Like danger was just another inconvenience. I couldn't shake the image of the man's face, the hollowness in his eyes, the way his voice cracked when he spoke. I told myself he was harmless, maybe hungry, maybe lost. But deep down something didn't sit right. Why our flat? Why not any other door in the building? That evening I checked every lock twice. My mother said prayers before bed. Still I couldn't relax. Every sound, the groan of the pipes, the thud of a scooter below had made me flinch. When I finally drifted off, I dreamt of the man again. Only this time he wasn't asking for water. He was standing by the bed, whispering something I couldn't hear. 2 nights later, it happened again. The power cut out just after midnight. I'd been sitting by the window reading on my phone, and when the screen went black, my stomach dropped. "Not again," I muttered, lighting a candle. My mother was already asleep. I went to check the door out of habit, pressing on the new latch. It held firm. I almost laughed at myself, jumpy over shadows. Then from the balcony came a faint tap. I froze. "Hello?" a whisper said. I turned slowly. The curtain moved just slightly. This time I grabbed the rolling pin from the counter and stepped forward. "Who's there?" "It's me," the voice said. "Don't be scared." The man stepped into view again, same clothes, same hollow face. But now he looked worse. Pale, sweat-slick, shaking. I kept my distance. "You said you wouldn't come back." "I know." He swallowed hard. "But I had nowhere else to go. Please, just a little food." "I'll leave." I hesitated. I wanted to throw him out, call for help. But I saw his bare feet again, cracked and bleeding. The human part of me overruled the fearful one. I handed him a piece of bread, keeping my eyes on him. He ate quickly, almost shamefully. "Thank you," he said between bites. "Oh, you're kind." "Kind doesn't mean stupid," I snapped. "You broke in twice." He lowered his head. "I didn't mean to scare you. I used to live here. Before they tore down the old block, that stopped me cold." "You what?" "My family had this flat," he said. "Then we lost everything. I came back because I didn't know where else to go." The blackout hummed around us, a strange, suspended silence. For a moment I saw not a stranger, but a ghost of the city itself. Forgotten, displaced, invisible. "Please go," I said quietly. He nodded. "You won't see me again." When the lights flicked back on, the balcony was empty. I didn't tell the police. What would I even say? That a stranger with sad eyes and dirty feet had slipped through our broken lock to ask for water and bread? They'd laugh or worse, not believe me at all. But I did tell the landlord again, demanded a new lock, a stronger door, bars for the balcony. He promised to fix it by the weekend. The next morning I found something on the doorstep, a small brass key, old and worn, tied with a scrap of red thread. No note. I don't know why, but I knew it was from him. That night I finally slept. Not because I felt safe, but because I'd made peace with something. The world outside our door isn't divided neatly into good and bad, safe and dangerous. Sometimes it's just people, desperate, broken, trying to survive the only way they know how. But still, I lock the door every night now, always. And sometimes, when the lights flicker and the hum of the city fades into silence, I think about the man in the blackout, and how close fear and compassion can look in the dark. Long before that October storm, I used to think silence was peace. Living out here in the countryside had that old postcard charm. Rolling fields, quiet lanes, and neighbors so far apart you could go weeks without seeing another soul. When my husband Ryan started traveling more for work, I told myself it was fine. I had the kids, the house, my small photography channel online. I could handle the quiet. But quiet has a sound of its own, one you only hear when there's nothing else around. That night began like any other. The kids were finally asleep upstairs, the wind outside whispering against the windows. I brewed coffee, set my phone on the counter, and hit record for a short video. "Cozy, stormy night in the country, browse," I said, smiling at the camera. The thunder grumbled right on cue. I thought it would make a great clip. By 9, the rain turned heavy. sharp streaks against the kitchen glass. I made my usual round of the house, locking the doors, checking the windows. Habit, routine, control. When I came back to the kitchen, something didn't look right. The back door was slightly open, just a crack, barely an inch, but I knew I'd shut it. I always shut it. A pulse of unease rippled through me. The storm howled, shaking the trees outside. For a second, I told myself it was the wind, that maybe the latch hadn't caught. But my gut said otherwise. I stepped closer. The cold air from outside brushed my skin. My hand reached for the handle, and then a wave of dizziness hit me. The world tilted. I remember the mug slipping from my hand, the sound of ceramic shattering, and then everything went black. When I woke, I wasn't on the floor. My head felt stuffed with static, my vision swimming in and out of focus. It took me a moment to realize I was sitting upright, in the kitchen chair. My arms ached, pinned behind me. When I tried to move, something tugged at my skin. Tape. Duct tape bound my wrists, my ankles, even my chest against the chair's backrest. My mouth wouldn't move properly. The sticky pull of tape covered it, sealing my voice inside me. Panic came in waves. I shook, twisted, tried to scream, but all that came out were muffled sobs. My breath turned shallow, fogging the air in front of me. Then a click. The small lamp over the kitchen table flickered on, cutting through the darkness. A man stood in the doorway. His face was shadowed beneath a hood, a scarf covering the lower half. His voice when he spoke was low, steady. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "Just tell me where the cash is." My mind spun. I tried to speak, shaking my head, mumbling through the tape.
He didn't yell.
Didn't rush. He just moved around the kitchen like he'd been there before, opening drawers, sliding jewelry into a small canvas bag. The whole thing felt impossible, like watching a nightmare through water. When he turned toward the stairs, something inside me broke. I screamed behind the tape, desperate and raw. He stopped, looked back at me for a long moment, and said quietly, "Don't worry, your kids are still asleep." He left after that, just the sound of rain swallowing him as he disappeared into the storm. For a long time, I couldn't move. I just sat there, the clock ticking too loud, the tape sticking to my skin. Finally, I fought back, pulling, twisting, tearing until I freed my mouth, my wrists. The first thing I did was run upstairs. The kids were safe, both sleeping. I dropped to my knees beside their beds and cried harder than I ever had in my life. The police arrived within the hour. Blue lights flashed against the wet windows, and the house, my safe, perfect little home, became a crime scene. I sat wrapped in a blanket, telling them what I could. A man, average height, hoodie, calm voice. No accent I could place. One of the officers said, "You're lucky. People who break in at night don't usually leave quietly." That word, lucky, echoed for days afterward. They took fingerprints, photos, statements. The house looked smaller now, stripped of its warmth. Every creak made me jump. Every shadow felt like a shape waiting to move. Ryan flew home the next morning, guilt carved into his face. He tried to stay strong for me and the kids, but I saw how shaken he was. We installed new locks, cameras, alarms, everything. But no gadget could fix the way my body still flinched at the sound of thunder. 2 weeks later, the police called. They'd arrested a suspect. He was local, early 30s, no prior record. He'd followed my channel online, piecing together where we lived through the little glimpses I posted. Driveway shots, background views, even the brand of coffee mug I used. He confessed everything, said he never meant to harm anyone, just desperate, broke, angry at the world. But that didn't stop the nightmares. I stopped filming for months. Every time I turned on the camera, I froze. My followers kept asking where I'd gone. Some guessed family trouble. Others said burnout. I couldn't bring myself to tell them the truth. The silence of the house, once peaceful, now pressed in like a second skin. The kids went to school. Ryan worked from home when he could. But at night, when the wind picked up, the memories came crawling back. Sometimes I'd wake at 3 a.m., convinced I heard footsteps. Sometimes I'd dream of tape, tight, unbreakable, and wake gasping for air. Therapy helped, slowly. My counselor told me, control is how we survive, but acceptance is how we heal. So I began small, taking walks again, learning to breathe through the panic. Eventually I posted a video, not about decor or recipes, but about fear. Real fear. I talked about what it does to you, how it lingers, how it changes the way you see the world. The video went viral. Thousands of people messaged me. Some with stories worse than mine, some thanking me for saying what they couldn't. That night I cried again, but this time it wasn't from fear, it was release. A year passed before I could stand outside during a storm again. When it finally came, lightning splitting the sky, rain hammering the roof, I stood at the window and watched. The house was different now. Not just the locks or the cameras, but something deeper, stronger. Ryan held my hand. The kids laughed upstairs, counting thunder like a game. And for the first time, the sound didn't make my chest tighten. I realized then that the storm never really left me, it just changed shape. It became the reminder that safety isn't guaranteed, that we live in a world where even good people can face bad nights, but also that fear doesn't have to define the rest of our lives. That night I made another video. No filters, no background music. Just me, my voice steady under the sound of rain. Sometimes, I said, the scariest stories are the ones that happen in the quietest places. But surviving them, that's where real strength lives. And as thunder rolled through the hills, I believed it. Evil often hides in plain sight, and fear can find us even in our safest spaces. But strength isn't the absence of fear. It's the choice to keep living, trusting, and rebuilding after it passes. Always guard what you share, value your safety over your image, and remember, storms don't last forever, but the light that follows is always yours to claim. They say New York never sleeps, but from the 34th floor it almost looks peaceful. The taxis are little dots of gold. The sirens just faint color bleeding through glass. I used to love that view. The skyline glittering against the Hudson like it was alive. When I first started babysitting for the Johnsons, I thought I'd made it. I was 20, studying psychology at NYU, and broke enough to take any gig that didn't involve flipping eggs at a diner. The Johnsons were the kind of people who sent Christmas cards in embossed envelopes. Peter Johnson ran a tech firm downtown. His wife Elaine taught art history at Columbia. They had 2 kids, Oliver 8 and little Maisie 4, polite, bright, and funny in that Manhattan private school way. Every Friday they went out to some work dinner or gallery event, and I got paid $50 an hour to order sushi and make sure the kids brushed their teeth. I liked their apartment. It smelled like cedar and expensive candles. The doorman always greeted me by name. When I told my mom where I was working, she said, "Honey, you couldn't be safer than 30 floors up in a building like that." She wasn't wrong. Not then. That Friday started like any other. The air had that early winter bite, the kind that turns breath to smoke before the first real snow. I came straight from campus, still wearing my gray NYU hoodie and jeans. Elaine was in a blue dress, rushing to find her earrings while Peter adjusted his tie. "Nina, pizza's in the fridge. Kids are already in pajamas," she said, kissing her daughter's forehead. "We'll be back by midnight, maybe earlier," Peter added. "You know the alarm code, right? It beeps when we open the door, so don't panic if you hear it." I smiled, confident. "Got it, Mr. Johnson." By 9, the kids were asleep. I reheated a slice of pizza, scrolled through Netflix, and settled on a rom-com I'd already seen twice. Around 11, I made tea, wrapped myself in a blanket, and let my eyes drift shut to the sound of city wind against the glass. The sound that woke me was soft, one small, polite beep. For a second, I thought it was the microwave or maybe my phone. Then I realized what it was. The door alarm. My stomach tightened. I sat up slowly, blinking against the TV's glow. The digital clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m. The Johnsons weren't due home yet. "Mr. Johnson?" I called, voice trembling just a little. No answer. I stood, my bare feet quiet on the marble floor, and glanced toward the hallway. A faint draft swept through the apartment, cold air that didn't belong there. Then a man's voice, low and uneven, echoed from the darkness near the entryway. "You shouldn't be here." I froze. My first thought was Peter's brother or someone else with a key. But there was something in the tone, slow, deliberate, almost rehearsed. I ducked behind the kitchen island, heart slamming in my chest. My hand shook as I grabbed my phone and whispered, 911. The operator's voice came calm and professional. 911, what's your emergency? "There's someone in the apartment," I whispered. "I'm babysitting. 34th floor, 240 Riverside Tower." The door alarm went off. I heard a man. "Stay on the line, ma'am. Is anyone else in the apartment?" "Yes, the kids, upstairs sleeping." As I said it, my eyes flicked to the baby monitor propped beside the sink. The screen showed 2 quiet rooms bathed in nightlight glow. Then static rolled across it, white noise, lines of interference. For a heartbeat, the image cleared and I saw a face. Not Oliver. Not anyone I recognized. A man's face, pale, close to the camera, staring straight into it. Then the feed went black. I gasped, clapping a hand over my mouth. The dispatcher was saying something I barely heard. My breath came short and fast. "Nina," I told myself. "You need to move now." I crawled toward the hallway, every nerve screaming to run. The man's footsteps echoed faintly from the other end of the apartment. Slow, confident, like he knew exactly where he was going. There was no way out except the front door or the balcony. The elevator needed a keycard and the stairwell was beyond the living room, too exposed. I thought about the kids. I couldn't leave them. The dispatcher's voice came through again. "Ma'am, officers are on their way. Stay hidden. Do not engage." I reached the base of the stairs, heart pounding. A light flicked on upstairs, Maisie's room. Then I heard her small voice, half asleep. "Nina?" The man's footsteps quickened. "Stay in your room, sweetie." I shouted, then cursed myself for making noise. He was on the stairs now. I saw his silhouette. Broad shoulders, dark jacket, moving with awful calm. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, a ceramic mug from the counter, and hurled it. It shattered against the wall beside him. He flinched but kept coming. That's when the baby monitor flickered back on for a moment. I saw Oliver's bed empty. Panic knifed through me until a small hand tugged my sleeve. I turned, Oliver wide-eyed, whispering. I heard something. "What's happening?" "Shh," I mouthed. "Hide behind me." The man reached the bottom step. He was maybe mid-30s, unshaven, eyes cold and wet-looking. He smiled, small, joyless. "Where is she?" he said. I had no idea what he meant. "Who?" He didn't answer. I backed toward the balcony, tugging Oliver with me. The city's cold air seeped through the sliding glass door. If I could get out there, maybe I could climb over to the neighbor's unit, or at least buy time until police arrived. I yanked the handle, the door groaning open, wind roaring in. The man lunged, and then suddenly, from the hall, red and blue lights strobed through the windows. "Police, freeze!" He bolted toward the balcony railing. In one terrifying motion, he swung his leg over and disappeared into the night. They found his footprints on the balcony the next morning, wet boot marks and one partial palm print on the rail. The officers told me he'd climbed up from the 33rd floor, then broke in through the Johnson's sliding door. Elaine arrived home around 1 a.m., pale and shaking when she saw the flashing lights. She pulled Oliver into her arms while I sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket. When the detective asked for my statement, my voice sounded far away even to me. He said I shouldn't be here. He knew where the baby monitor was. He was calm. The detective nodded, scribbling notes. "We'll check security footage." "Did he take anything?" "No," I said. "Just scared the life out of us." 2 days later, I got a call from Detective Morales. His tone was heavy. "Nina, we think we know who the guy was. Does the name Lucas Brent sound familiar?" It didn't. "He's the ex-boyfriend of their previous nanny. She was fired last month. Some incident with the kids, minor stuff. We think he came back looking for her, didn't realize they'd replaced her." I sat on the edge of my dorm bed, the city humming outside my window. "So, he thought I was her?" "Looks that way. You were lucky, Nina. He's got a record, assault, stalking. We've got units searching for him now." Lucky. The word rang in my ears. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that pale face in the monitor, the dead calm in his eyes. I'd replay the sound of that chime, the single beep that changed everything. Weeks passed before I could step into another high-rise. The Johnsons offered to pay for therapy and even gave me a recommendation letter. I thanked them but told them I wasn't babysitting anymore. Instead, I started volunteering at a campus hotline, helping students who'd had scares of their own. One girl had woken to find her roommate's ex trying to get in through the fire escape. Another had been followed from the subway for 3 blocks. Each story felt different but carried the same weight, that invisible shiver of what if. In February, Detective Morales called again. "We got him," he said simply. An anonymous tip. "He's in custody." I thanked him, but it didn't feel like victory, more like closing a door that should have never been opened. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about that apartment, the scent of cedar candles, the hush of the elevator ride up, the skyline stretching endless below. From that height, you think you're untouchable, but danger doesn't care how high you are. It just finds another way in. I've learned to trust my instincts. I've learned that safety isn't a floor number or a lock code. It's awareness, presence, listening to the tiny alarms in your own chest before the real one ever sounds. Now, when I babysit my niece back home in Jersey, I always check the windows twice. I keep the phone beside me. I still make tea and watch Netflix, but when the kettle whistles, I smile a little, because I'm awake. Safety isn't guaranteed by walls, locks, or height. It's built by awareness, preparation, and trust in your instincts. Listen to the quiet signals, the uneasy feeling, the second thought, the faint alarm before the storm. Because sometimes danger doesn't break the door down. It just walks in when you stop paying attention. I never wanted to build a monument. I wanted a refuge. When I left San Diego for Mexico, it wasn't for the beaches or the tequila, or even the architecture. It was for quiet. I'd spent 20 years designing homes for people who measured their happiness by square footage, who wanted walls to impress their friends instead of protect their hearts. I told myself I was different, that I could build something honest, something transparent. So when Camilla and I found the land outside Guadalajara, a hillside overlooking the valley dotted with agave and brittle grass, I knew it was meant for glass. No secrets, I'd said, sketching the plans. Everything visible. Camilla smiled the way she always did when she didn't agree but didn't want to fight. She was a painter, quiet but sharp. Her studio back in San Diego had been filled with canvases that looked like storms, grays and greens colliding, beautiful but never calm. When we moved, she packed only her brushes and one painting, an unfinished portrait of our daughter, Lucia. I told her the glass house would inspire us both. For a while it did. The light was pure. The walls caught the sunrise like an ocean. From the nursery upstairs, you could see the entire valley. We'd wake to birds tapping the windows, to mornings that felt endless. But beauty has a way of becoming unbearable when life inside it isn't right. I started getting more commissions, more travel. Camila stayed home with the baby, painting less and drinking more. I told myself it was just adjustment. She told me I was blind. You want everything perfect, she'd say. You don't even see the cracks until they're too big to fix. I laughed it off. I always did. The night everything fell apart began like all the others. Good wine, polite laughter, and a sense that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. It was a Thursday in late summer. The valley air was warm and heavy, the kind that makes your clothes stick. I'd invited 2 clients from Mexico City and their wives. Nothing extravagant. Roasted chicken, white wine, candles reflected in the glass walls. Camilla looked beautiful that night. She wore a blue dress I hadn't seen in years. She smiled at all the right moments, laughed too loudly at jokes she didn't like. I remember her filling her wine glass again and again, her hand steady, her eyes distant. When the guests left around midnight, she said, "I'm going to bed. You should lock up." That was our routine. She'd retreat upstairs, I'd stay to clean and turn off the lights. But that night, something in her voice caught me. Not anger, not sadness, resignation. I let it go. The guests' taillights disappeared down the road and the house grew quiet. I poured myself a last drink and stood at the glass wall, watching the valley lights flicker like fallen stars. My reflection looked older than I felt, gray at the temples, a little heavier, eyes tired. Then movement behind me, just a flicker. I turned, nothing. That's when I saw the footprints, muddy, faint, trailing across the white marble from the back door toward the stairs. My first thought was that I'd tracked them in earlier, but they were too small for me, too narrow. "Camilla?" I called. No answer. The baby monitor on the counter crackled, then went dead. I felt a coldness I can't describe. Not fear exactly, something older, deeper, like the air before a storm. I climbed the stairs, my heart pounding in my throat. The nursery door was open. The crib was empty. The curtains fluttered in the wind. Outside on the terrace steps lay my phone, and a note written in Camilla's handwriting. "You should have locked the house when you lied to me." By the time the police arrived, the sun was coming up. Lucia was found 3 hours later at Camilla's sister's house, safe, sleeping in her arms. Camilla had dropped her off around midnight, they said, kissed her on the forehead and driven away without saying a word. Her car turned up near the bridge on Route 80, driver's door open, headlights on, purse inside. The river below was shallow that time of year. No footprints, no body. I sat in the police station that entire day answering the same questions. When did you last see your wife? Did you argue that night? Why did she leave the baby? I gave them the same answers until the words felt meaningless. I told them about the note. The officer, young, polite, with tired eyes, nodded slowly. You said it mentioned a lie, he asked. I said I didn't know what she meant. That was only partly true. There'd been rumors, whispers. A woman I'd hired once, long before Camilla and I left California. It had been nothing. A stupid flirtation that meant less than a shadow. But somehow Camilla had found the messages months later. We'd promised to move on. But I knew she never really had. After the police released me, I drove back to the house. The valley sun glared off the glass walls. From a distance, it still looked perfect. But inside, it felt like a museum of our mistakes. The empty crib, the half-finished bottle of wine, the muddy footprints, everything was evidence of something broken. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked from room to room, turning off lights, locking doors. The house creaked in the wind. Around 2 a.m., the baby monitor, dead since that night, crackled again. A whisper, faint and distorted. Amelia. I froze. Static swallowed the voice. I told myself it was interference. But when I checked the monitor's camera feed, the screen flickered, then showed the nursery, the empty crib, and for a split second, a reflection in the glass door, a woman's silhouette, long hair, standing just outside. Then black. Weeks passed. Camilla's disappearance made local news for a while, then faded. The police said she'd probably fallen into the river, washed downstream. But I knew they hadn't found a body because they hadn't looked hard enough, or because she didn't want to be found. I stayed in the house because I couldn't leave it. It was my penance. Every reflection showed her face. Every night brought new sounds, footsteps, whispers, doors closing softly. I started drinking. I stopped drawing. The client stopped calling. One afternoon, her sister came to pick up Lucia's toys. She looked around the house and shook her head. She hated this place, she said. She told me once it felt like living inside a mirror. You can see everything except yourself. That night I found her phone. It had been hidden behind a drawer in the nursery, wrapped in a scarf. The battery was dead, but when I charged it, I found dozens of voice memos. Most were quiet, just her breathing. But one, recorded 2 nights before she vanished, still plays in my head. I see him sometimes. The man he used to be before the lies, before the house. I don't think he knows how much he's lost. Maybe this is the only way to make him see it. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The next morning, I went to the bridge. The air was cold, the water still. I stood where her car had been found, watching the reflection of the hills ripple below. It struck me then, the house wasn't glass to show the world our honesty. It was glass to convince ourselves we had nothing to hide. But transparency without truth is just exposure. A year later, I sold my practice. The house sat empty for months, unsellable. Too much tragedy attached to its name. I finally bought it back myself and began again. I replaced every glass wall with concrete. I wanted solidity, something that couldn't shatter or reflect. People thought I was crazy, but I needed walls that could hold secrets, not display them. I live there still, alone. Lucia stays with her aunt. Sometimes she visits on weekends. She's 5 now, curious, bright. She doesn't remember her mother, but she asks about her sometimes. Did Mommy like this house? She asked once. She liked the view, I said. When she runs down the hallway, her laughter echoes off the concrete, not glass. It's duller, quieter, but real. Some nights I still dream of Camilla. In the dream, she's painting by the window, humming softly. She looks up, smiles, and says, "You finally built something honest." I wake to silence, the gray light of dawn seeping through the narrow windows I left uncovered. The valley lies below, same as ever. The bridge glints faintly in the distance. Sometimes I drive there, park, and walk down to the river. I stand where they found her car and I wait for a sign. None ever comes, but the waiting itself has become its own kind of peace. The house no longer feels haunted. It feels empty in a way I can live with. Maybe that's the closest thing to forgiveness I'll ever get. Truth isn't about visibility, it's about honesty. You can build walls of glass, expose every inch of your life to the world. But if what's inside is false, the transparency becomes just another disguise. Real strength isn't in showing everything. It's in facing what you've tried to hide. Emilio built a house without secrets, but learned too late that secrets don't vanish when you make them visible. They only echo louder in the silence. In love, in art, in life, The foundation that endures isn't beauty or openness. It's truth. I never thought silence could be heavy, but after David died, it became the loudest thing in my life. The house we built together sat on the edge of the Scottish Highlands, a gray stone cottage with a roof that sighed when the wind pushed against it. He used to joke that the place had a heartbeat of its own, the creaks, the whistles, the subtle shifting of the old wood. When he passed, those sounds turned from comfort to reminder. Every creak was a ghost of him moving from room to room. I'd lived there alone for 2 years. People asked why I didn't move closer to town, but I couldn't bear to leave what we made. The moor stretched for miles around the cottage, a sea of heather and mist that swallowed the world at night. My nearest neighbor was half a mile away, and most days I preferred it that way. The quiet was company I could control, until I couldn't. That November, storms rolled in from the coast, tearing across the hills like wild animals. The wind never stopped. It clawed at the windows and rattled the roof slates. I spent those nights by the fire, wrapped in one of David's old flannel blankets, reading whatever book I could manage to focus on. That night was no different, until it was. The power flickered just past 10. The light stuttered and died, leaving the house in a shroud of firelight. I sighed, grabbed another log, and told myself the generator would kick in soon. It didn't. Then, under the hum of the storm, I heard it. The soft click of the garden gate. It was a sound I knew well. The squeaky hinge, the dull thud of wood on the latch. No animal could make that. Someone was outside. I told myself it was the wind, maybe a loose latch, but my stomach didn't believe me. The seconds stretched, the fire cracked, and then came the knock, slow, deliberate, human. "Miss," a man's voice called through the door. "I think I'm lost. My car broke down, please." Every hair on my arm stood up. I took a breath, forcing my voice to stay even. "I'll call someone for you." "You can't," he said. "There's no service out here." He wasn't wrong. The signal dropped during storms. But the way he said it, like he already knew, made me step back. The latch jiggled once. "Please," he said again. And this time the word didn't sound like a plea. It sounded like a command. I grabbed the fireplace poker. My hand trembled. I didn't answer. After a few moments of silence, I heard gravel crunch, footsteps moving away. I waited for relief to come, but it didn't, because minutes later a window upstairs creaked open. The creak from upstairs wasn't loud, but in that dead quiet, it might as well have been a scream. I froze by the fire, listening. "David?" I whispered before I caught myself. Habit. I moved to the foot of the stairs, poker still in hand, every instinct screaming that I shouldn't go up there. But doing nothing was worse. I climbed each step slowly, feeling them complain under my weight. The second-floor hallway was dim, lit only by the moonlight leaking through the curtains. The sound had come from the guest room, the one we hadn't used since before David got sick. When I reached the doorway, I saw it. The window was open just an inch, wind pushing the curtains like breath. Raindrops hit the sill. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would break through my ribs. I crossed the room and slammed the window shut, twisting the lock tight. Then I checked the others, and all locked. Nothing disturbed. Maybe it was the wind, I thought. Maybe the latch was loose, or maybe he had been telling the truth. I forced myself to look outside. The storm had calmed just enough to see the dark outline of the yard. The gate hung open, swaying back and forth. No figure, no movement. I went back downstairs, keeping the poker close. My phone still had no signal, but I tried anyway. Nothing. "Okay," I said aloud, like saying it would make it real. "He's gone. It's over." I didn't believe myself. I threw another log on the fire and sat by the window, waiting for dawn, trying not to look at the shadows that stretched across the walls. But around midnight, I saw something move outside, a flicker of light like someone's flashlight sweeping across the field. Then another. 2 of them. They were searching. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I watched from the window, keeping the fire low, every sense sharpened by fear. The flashlights moved slowly through the fog. Not random, not lost. Searching with purpose. 2 figures, both tall, both in dark coats. One carried something long, maybe a tool, maybe worse. I thought of calling for help again, but there was still no signal. The landline had been dead for months. The storm last spring had torn the cable, and I hadn't fixed it. I whispered to myself, "You're fine. Just stay quiet." But quiet wasn't protection anymore. Quiet was a trap. After an hour, the lights vanished. I waited, counting the minutes, straining to hear anything beyond the wind. Nothing. At some point, exhaustion caught me. I must have dozed in the chair because the next thing I knew, pale morning light seeped through the curtains. The storm had passed. I checked the yard. Footprints dotted the mud from the gate to the porch, and then around the side of the house. They had been there. I didn't even bother changing out of my flannel pants. I grabbed my coat, keys, and drove straight to town. The sheriff's office in Invermore was small, just a single-story brick building that always smelled faintly of coffee and damp paper. Sheriff Haynes had known David and me for years. When I told him what happened, he frowned but didn't look surprised. "You sure it wasn't just travelers? Storm like that, folks get stranded all the time." "Travelers don't open windows," I said sharply. He sighed, scribbling notes. "We'll send someone out to take a look." "But Eleanor, you live far out. Sometimes wind and fear make a bad mix." "I know what I heard." He nodded but didn't meet my eyes. "We'll check it out." They did, or said they did. That afternoon, Deputy Collins drove out, took photos of the footprints, and left. By evening, he called to say they'd washed away in the rain. No other evidence. I wanted to believe it was over, but that night when I looked out from the kitchen window, the gate was closed again. I hadn't touched it. A week passed. The storm stopped. Life settled back into its old rhythm, or tried to. I told myself it was fine to be alone again, but every night I still checked the windows twice. Then one Thursday I heard it again, the click of the gate. I froze in the kitchen. The clock read 10:14 p.m. I turned off the lights, heart pounding, and peered through the crack in the curtain. A figure stood by the gate, not moving, just standing. "Miss," a voice called. The same voice. "It's me." From before, I gripped the counter. "Go away." I called the police. "I know," he said softly. That wasn't very nice. And then, silence. When the police arrived 20 minutes later, they found nothing. Just footprints again, circling the house, fading into the moor. That was the last time I saw him. Or maybe the last time I knew I saw him. Sometimes when the wind shifts just right, I swear I still hear the click of that gate. Fear is a quiet teacher. It shows us not only what lurks outside, but what we carry within. Trust your instincts, and they exist for a reason. And never mistake isolation for safety. The world is not always cruel, but it never rewards those who ignore the sound of the gate when it opens. When Liam and I bought the house on Maple Drive, I thought we'd finally found peace. After years of renting noisy apartments in the city, the quiet hum of suburban life felt like a gift. Our place wasn't big, just a semi-detached house at the end of a cul-de-sac lined with maples that flamed red every October. The kids could finally have a backyard, and I could finally sleep without sirens. We moved in mid-April, the air soft with spring. The couple next door, Tom and Carol, introduced themselves the first day. They were older, maybe late 50s. Tom was tall and broad-shouldered, with gray hair and a polite smile that never quite reached his eyes. Carol was smaller, her voice careful, almost apologetic. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, handing me a plate of cookies she must have baked that morning. I thanked her and asked how long they'd lived there. "Oh, a long time," she said quickly, glancing at Tom. "Almost 20 years." I didn't think much of it. People have their ways. They seemed private, and that was fine by me. We had our own chaos to manage. 2 young kids, new jobs, and a house that needed more fixing than we'd realized. The first few months passed uneventfully. Liam was working long hours at the hardware store he managed, and I was picking up extra shifts at the clinic. The neighbors kept to themselves. Sometimes I'd hear faint music through the wall, old country songs or the buzz of late-night TV. I liked to imagine them slow dancing in their kitchen, holding on to years of quiet routines. Peace, I thought then, finally had a sound. Soft, ordinary, and steady. It started on a Thursday night. I'd traded shifts and came home early. The kids were at my sister's, Liam was closing the store, and the house was still. I made tea, sat on the couch, and for the first time that week let myself exhale. Then I heard it. At first I thought it was the TV, muffled voices through the shared wall. But then a woman's voice rose, sharp and trembling. "Please, Tom, stop." Then a crash. My stomach clenched. I muted the kettle. Another sound followed, something heavy hitting the floor. I stood up, heart hammering. Should I call someone? Go over? I hovered near the wall, listening. The house next door went silent. Then faintly, I heard crying. I walked to our front door before I could talk myself out of it. The porch light from next door was off, but a faint glow from inside showed a blurred shape moving behind their frosted glass door. I knocked. Carol? Are you okay? No answer. But the shadow moved again, fast, jerky, like someone dragging something heavy. I stepped back, my pulse racing. Carol? I tried again, louder this time. Still nothing. Finally, I turned and walked back inside, locking the door behind me. My hand shook as I texted Liam. Something's wrong next door. He called immediately. Sophie, don't get involved. You don't know what's going on. She might be hurt. If it's serious, call the police. But don't go over there again. I wanted to argue, but deep down I knew he was right. Instead, I sat by the window for hours, watching the darkened house next door. At some point, the light in their kitchen flicked off. The silence that followed felt wrong. We were both asleep when the pounding started. It was so loud it rattled the hallway pictures. I jolted upright, heart slamming against my ribs. Who? Liam started, grabbing his phone. The pounding came again, frantic, desperate. I pulled on a robe and ran to the door. Through the glass, I saw Carol, barefoot, her nightgown torn, eyes wide with terror. Please, she whispered when I opened the door. He's coming. For a second, I didn't understand. Then I saw movement behind her. A man's shadow cutting across the yard, illuminated by the streetlight. Tom. He was holding something long and dark. A wrench, maybe. Get inside! I shouted, yanking Carol in. Liam slammed the door just as Tom's fist hit the other side with a deafening thud. The whole frame shuddered. The kids were crying upstairs. Liam threw the deadbolt and grabbed his phone. Call 911. Tom hit the door again, harder this time. The sound echoed down the hallway. Carol slid to the floor, shaking. He's lost it, she whispered. He thinks I was leaving him. The pounding stopped. For a moment, there was only the sound of Carol's sobs in the wind against the house. Then footsteps outside, retreating. We herded the kids into the pantry at the back of the kitchen and shut the door. I pressed my ear to the wood, listening for sirens, for any sign of him. Every second felt like an hour. Finally, the blue lights came. The police found Tom a few houses down, wandering barefoot, still clutching the wrench. He didn't resist. Carol was taken to the hospital. The officers told us it wasn't the first time neighbors had heard shouting, but no one had ever reported it. She'd apparently tried to leave him that night, packed a small bag, called a friend for a ride. He'd caught her by the door. When she ran, she'd gone straight to us. The next morning, the house next door was sealed off with tape. An officer came by for a statement, his voice calm but tired. Domestic cases, he said quietly, shaking his head. They're the hardest. You never know what's really happening behind those walls. Liam held my hand while I talked. I could feel his pulse racing through his fingers. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made me flinch. I kept hearing her voice and that whisper at our door. He's coming. I started leaving the radio on after that, soft music playing through the night. The silence had changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt alive, waiting. Carol never came back. Her sister moved her out while Tom awaited trial. For months, the house next door sat empty, blinds drawn, grass overgrown. The neighborhood pretended it hadn't happened, but everyone knew. I saw a for sale sign go up that summer. Sometimes when I passed, I'd glance through the window and see the faint outline of where their couch had been. I wondered if she'd been happy there once. Liam apologized one evening over dinner. You were right, he said quietly. We should have done something sooner. I shook my head. We didn't know. But that was only partly true. I'd heard the crying, the crash, and told myself it wasn't my business. Now I know better. We still live on Maple Drive. The new family next door is young, with a golden retriever that barks at everything. I don't mind the noise. Silence, I've learned, isn't always safe. At night, when the kids are asleep and the house settles into its old bones, I still keep the radio on. Soft, steady, reminding me that peace isn't about quiet. It's about knowing the people around you are okay. Don't look away. When something feels wrong, when you hear fear in someone's voice, act. We tell ourselves not to meddle, not to assume, but silence can be its own kind of danger. True community isn't built on minding your own business. It's built on watching out for each other, because sometimes the wall between your home and someone else's life is thinner than you think. I used to think suburbs were safe. That was the whole point of moving there, safety. After our second child, Claire and I wanted somewhere quiet, somewhere predictable. We'd lived in downtown Sacramento for years, but the late-night noise and constant sirens made her nervous. So we traded our cramped apartment for a beige two-story house on a cul-de-sac lined with mailboxes and maple trees. It looked like the kind of place where people still borrowed cups of sugar and waved when they saw you pulling in from work. We met the neighbors within the first week. The Millers on one side, retirees with more lawn ornaments than I could count, and the Lamberts on the other, a young couple with twin boys. Everyone was polite, chatty in that surface-level way, and for the first time in years I felt like we'd done something right. Claire seemed happier too. She took morning walks with the baby stroller, our 4-year-old Lily, riding her scooter ahead of her. I'd catch them from the window sometimes. Claire's hair tied up, the stroller rolling smooth, sunlight spilling across the sidewalk. It was the picture of normal. We'd been there about 3 months when I decided to host a small dinner. A couple of friends from work, Claire's sister and her husband. We cooked, laughed, drank wine, nothing wild. Around midnight, after everyone left, I went outside to take out the trash. That's when I noticed the flower pot by the front steps looked off-center. It took me a second to realize what was missing: the spare key. I'd kept it under there since we moved in. A dumb habit, but one I never questioned. "Claire?" I called inside. "Did you move the key?" She looked up from the sink, frowning. "No, why?" "It's gone," she shrugged. "Probably fell somewhere in the dirt." I wanted to believe that. I knelt down, digging through the soil, but there was nothing. Still, I brushed it off. Probably dropped when I watered the plants. By the time we locked up and went to bed, it was past 1 in the morning. The house was quiet except for the hum of the AC. I fell asleep fast, but at 3 a.m. Claire shook me awake. Her voice was sharp, trembling. "Jake, the monitor." I sat up, disoriented. "What?" "Someone's in the nursery." I'll never forget the sound of the baby monitor that night. The faint static, the low hiss of air, and under it, something else. A whisper. I jumped out of bed, heart hammering, and sprinted down the hall. The nursery door was half open, swaying slightly. The nightlight glowed faintly on the wall. Inside, someone was standing by the crib. A man. He was tall, wearing dark clothes and a baseball cap pulled low. His hand hovered over the crib and I heard him whisper something. I couldn't make out the words, but they froze me in place. "Hey," I shouted. He turned his head, startled. His eyes caught the dim light, wide, panicked. Then he bolted. He didn't go for the door. He went for the window. Glass rattled as he disappeared into the night. I rushed to the crib. My son was crying, unharmed. Claire appeared behind me, clutching Lily to her chest. "Jake, oh my God, who was that?" "I don't know," I said, breathless. "Call 911. The police arrived within 15 minutes. Lights flashing against our windows, the whole street awake now. The neighbors came out in robes, whispering. I gave the officers everything I could. What he looked like, the direction he ran, how long he'd been there. When they finished searching the yard, the detective, a man named Ruiz, came inside. He held up something small and black. "Found this inside your baby monitor," he said. It was a tiny camera lens, no bigger than a pencil eraser. Claire's face went pale. "That's not ours." Ruiz nodded grimly. "Someone modified it." "This wasn't a break-in for valuables." My stomach dropped. "You mean he's been watching us?" "Could be." He paused. "Have you had any work done in the house recently?" Claire and I looked at each other. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Last month. A security installer. Cameras, alarms, that kind of thing." Ruiz's eyes narrowed. "You still have his information?" I nodded slowly, dread pooling in my chest. "Yeah, it's in the drawer." The installer's name was Kevin Moore, mid-30s, short, neatly dressed, with that friendly salesman smile. He'd come recommended through an online ad. I remembered how polite he'd been, taking off his shoes before walking in, explaining everything clearly. Motion sensors, cameras, app setup. He spent nearly 5 hours in our house that day, setting up cameras in the entryway, back porch, and nursery. Claire had been home the whole time. He was nice, she told the detective. Maybe too nice. Talked a lot about how families should feel safe. Detective Ruiz jotted that down. Did he work alone? No, he said his assistant called out sick. When they left, Ruiz promised they'd look into it. I spent the rest of the night sitting by the window with a baseball bat across my lap. The next morning, I checked our security system myself. The cameras worked, but when I logged into the app, I noticed something odd. There was another user account listed, one I hadn't created. Guest01. I deleted it instantly and changed every password I could think of. Wi-Fi, router, system login. Then I tore apart the flower pot and threw it in the trash. Days turned into weeks. The police never found him. Ruiz said Moore's business had dissolved, his office empty, phone disconnected. Probably operating under a fake name, he said. Claire couldn't sleep after that. Neither could I. We started keeping the bedroom door locked at night. Every sound, the creak of a floorboard, the hum of the fridge that made us jump. Neighbors started avoiding us. I could see it in their eyes and the quiet judgment. Bad things didn't happen here. Not in their perfect suburb. Then one night around 2 a.m., I woke to the faint sound of static again. The baby monitor. I sat up, pulse quickening. The screen was darkened, but the sound was there. Not crying, breathing. I unplugged it, threw it against the wall. Claire woke with a start. What is it? Someone was on the feed. We packed the kids into the car and drove straight to her sister's house across town. I didn't go back until morning. When I did, I found a note under the doormat. 2 words, nice family. We sold the house within 3 months. Claire didn't want to, but she couldn't walk past that nursery without crying. I couldn't either. We moved to an apartment complex downtown, smaller, noisier, but somehow safer. There's comfort in noise now. I changed careers after that. Started working for a home security company, the legitimate kind. It felt ironic at first, but also right. Sometimes when people call nervous about small things, a missing key, a flickering camera light, I tell them, change the locks anyway. I never mention what happened to us. Not the missing key, not the whisper in the nursery, not the camera hidden in the monitor. Some things are better left unspoken, but every time I see a flower pot by a front door, I think about how easy it is to confuse safety with habit, because safety isn't the locks you buy. It's the ones you build in your mind, the ones that make you pay attention before something happens, not after. If you'd asked me before that winter, I would have said our family was as ordinary as any on Maple Drive. Dad worked maintenance at the community college. Mom taught 2nd grade. My little sister, Lily, was 8, and I was 16, half bored, half restless, convinced that nothing exciting ever happened in our quiet Ohio suburb. That changed when Dad brought home the lights. He'd seen some viral video online, a house synchronized to Christmas music, and got it in his head that we could do it too. He called it a family project, but really it was his way of proving that we could keep up with the big houses across town. The Harrises didn't take vacations to Disney or drive new cars, but by God, we could have the brightest house on the block. It started in early November. Every weekend we climbed ladders, strung wires, tested circuits. Dad even bought a cheap controller that connected the lights to songs on the radio. When it worked, when the whole house blinked and danced perfectly to Jingle Bell Rock, we stood out front in the cold, grinning like idiots. Cars slowed to watch. Neighbors waved. I felt proud, like we'd built something together that couldn't be ignored. Mom loved it too at first. She'd hand out cocoa to the families who stopped to take pictures. It's bringing people joy, she said. Nothing wrong with a little extra light. Inside, we were happy in the simple ways families are. Happy dinner at 6, Dad humming along to the oldies station, Lily writing letters to Santa. I didn't realize how fragile that kind of peace could be, or how easily it could attract the wrong kind of attention. The week before Christmas, we made the local news. A reporter came by, filmed the house, interviewed Dad on the lawn. He was glowing, my old man who never bragged about anything, standing there in his work boots saying, "We just wanted to spread some cheer." The video went online. Thousands of views, comments like, "Looks amazing," and "Wish my neighbors did this." But there were other comments too, people asking for our address, wondering what kind of equipment we used, joking about how the electric bill must be crazy. One said, Bet they've got some nice stuff inside that house. I didn't tell my parents that part. Back then, I thought the internet was just noise. That year, Christmas felt bigger than ever. Relatives visited, presents piled under the tree, and the house buzzed with warmth and light. Dad and I kept the show running every night until 10. When snow fell on Christmas Eve, the lights made it look like we were living inside a snow globe. Mom called it a perfect year. She didn't know that, in between songs, I'd noticed a dark SUV parked across the street a few times. The windows were tinted, engine idling. I figured it was just people watching the show. Lots of cars stopped to see it. Why worry about one more? Inside, the gifts glittered beneath the tree. Some of them were small, socks, books, but others weren't. Mom had saved up for a new laptop for Dad. He'd bought her jewelry he couldn't really afford. I'd gotten Lily a bike, the first brand new one she'd ever had. We'd done well that year, and we wanted to show it. Maybe too much. After the big Christmas dinner, I remember standing outside with Dad, our breath turning white in the cold. "Looks good, huh?" he said, looking up at the lights. "Yeah," I told him, "it's awesome." He clapped me on the shoulder. "You helped make this happen. That means something." I wanted to believe him, but when I looked down the street, the other houses were dark, ordinary. For the first time, our brightness made me uneasy, like we were shouting in a place meant for whispers. 2 nights after Christmas, we were finishing dinner when the power flickered, then went completely out. The sudden dark felt strange. No hum from the fridge, no glow from the windows. Lily squealed. Mom said, "Must be the storm," though there wasn't one. Dad grabbed a flashlight and went to the garage to check the breaker. I followed a few steps behind. The air felt colder near the door. I heard him curse softly. Damn things tripped again. Then a crash, a door slamming open. Before I could move, 3 men burst in from the side door, faces hidden under ski masks. One shoved Dad against the wall. Another waved a gun. Mom screamed from the kitchen, "Everybody down, now!" My knees hit the tile. Lily was crying. I could smell the mud on their boots, the sweat and metal of the gun. "Where's the safe?" one demanded. We don't have a safe," Dad stammered. "Don't lie to me," the man snapped. "The house, the lights, all this crap. You got money somewhere." They tore through the living room, yanking drawers open, dumping boxes. I could hear ornaments breaking. One grabbed Mom's wrist, yanking off her bracelet. I stood halfway, not thinking, just wanting him to let her go. The gun turned toward me. "Sit down, kid. You move again, I'll make you sit." I froze. It felt like hours, but it was maybe 10 minutes before they ran out, arms full of whatever they'd taken. The door slammed, then silence. Dad crawled to the phone, his hands shaking as he called 911. When the police arrived, their lights painted the house red and blue. The neighbors came out in robes, whispering. I sat with Lily wrapped in a blanket, listening to the officers ask questions, watching the lights flicker on our windows one last time before the power company restored them. They'd taken our electronics, Mom's jewelry, Dad's wallet, but what they really took was something harder to name. The next morning, daylight showed the mess. Broken glass, torn wrapping paper, muddy footprints. The Christmas tree looked like it had been knocked sideways in a storm. Mom tried to clean, but her hands kept shaking. Dad just stood by the window staring at the yard full of deflated decorations. He unplugged the controller and tossed it in the trash. The police came back that afternoon. They said the robbers were likely part of a crew hitting high-profile houses, people who looked like they had valuables. The lights, the news story, the open curtains, all of it had made us stand out. "It wasn't your fault," the officer told Dad. "They pick easy targets." But I could see it in Dad's face. He blamed himself. That night, we slept in the same room, all of us together. I remember Lily whispering, "They're not coming back, right?" "No, honey," Mom said softly. "They're gone." I wanted to believe her, but every sound made me flinch. The creak of the furnace, the groan of the wind. In the days that followed, neighbors dropped off food, offered help. Some even donated money to replace what was stolen. But when someone suggested helping Dad rebuild the display next year, he shook his head. "No more lights," he said quietly. "We've had enough attention." I saw something change in him after that. He still smiled at work, but his laughter never quite reached his eyes. He double-locked every door, checked windows twice before bed. Mom took down the last of the decorations on New Year's Eve. The house looked bare, almost unfamiliar. I missed the glow, but I understood why it had to go. Time moved on. The police never caught the men. Insurance covered some of what we lost, but not all. By the next Christmas, things felt smaller. We still decorated, but just a few lights around the porch, nothing more. Inside, though, we were closer. We cooked together, played games, told stories instead of watching TV. One night, while wrapping presents, Dad said, "You know, Evan, I used to think showing people our best side meant being seen, but maybe it just means being together." I nodded. "Yeah, being seen doesn't always mean being safe." He smiled, tired but warm. "You're growing up, kid." We never went back to the big displays. Still, each year when I plug in that single string of porch lights, I think about that night. The crash of the door, Lily's cry, the way fear can burn brighter than any bulb. But I also think about what followed. The quiet mornings, the calm dinners, the soft laughter that replaced the blinding glow. Now, years later, whenever I drive past the houses that sparkle like Vegas on a cul-de-sac, I feel both admiration and worry. Beauty draws eyes. Sometimes the wrong ones. We still celebrate. We still believe in light. But we've learned how to keep it gentle, how to let it warm rather than blind. Maybe that's what growing up really is, learning the difference between shining and showing off. Brightness without awareness invites shadow. The Harris family learned that joy isn't measured by how loudly it glows, but by how safely it endures. In life, as in that winter, we must remember, being seen isn't the same as being secure, and the truest light is the one that shines quietly within, not the one that blinds the world outside. I used to think the ocean could wash anything clean. Maybe that's why I chose to live near it. For the sound, the distance, and the illusion that salt water could scrub away the things I didn't want to remember. My name's Leah Carter. I live on the coast just outside Cannon Beach, Oregon. The house isn't much, just a weather-worn bungalow tucked against the dunes, but it's home. My husband, Rick, works nights with the Coast Guard, and I work as a wildlife rescuer for a small nonprofit. My days are full of injured seals, tangled pelicans, and the occasional fox that strays too close to the highway. The only one who keeps me company most nights is Max, my German Shepherd, 100 pounds of loyalty and fur. He came from a rescue shelter, nervous around strangers but fierce when it mattered. When Rick's gone, Max is my shadow, padding beside me through every creak and whisper of the old house. That March evening had been calm. The air was heavy with brine, the kind that sticks to your skin, and the moon was a sliver over the water. I was sitting at the kitchen table sorting through intake forms for a stranded seal pup when Max started barking. Not the casual "there's a raccoon outside" bark. It was sharp, guttural, the sound he made when something wasn't right. "Max, enough!" I called from the doorway. He didn't stop. His body was pressed against the back fence, tail stiff, teeth bared at the dark stretch of trees beyond the yard. I grabbed my flashlight, pulled on Rick's old flannel, and stepped out into the wind. The beam cut through mist and dune grass. "Max!" I shouted again. Silence. Then the sound of paws thudding against the earth receding. I ran to the gate, but it was wide open, the latch hanging loose. On the ground, glinting in my flashlight, was Max's leather collar, torn clean through. Panic hits differently when it's quiet. The only sound was the waves, low and endless, and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I called for Max until my throat burned, then bolted back inside and grabbed the phone. Rick answered on the first ring, his voice crackling over static. "Leah, everything okay?" "Someone's taken Max," I said, barely getting the words out. "The gate's open. His collar's on the ground." Rick's tone changed instantly. "Lock the doors. Stay inside. I'm calling the sheriff right now." I double-checked every window, every latch, even the sliding glass door that never quite shut right. The house felt suddenly small. Every creak in the wood sounded like footsteps. I kept the porch light on, phone in hand, waiting for headlights that didn't come. Then maybe 15 minutes later, I heard a sound from the laundry room. A dull, heavy thud. "Max," my voice cracked. I took a few steps down the hall. Then I heard it, a bark. Short, muffled, but his. Relief hit me like a wave. I swung the door open and froze. A man was crouched beside the washing machine, one hand clamped over Max's muzzle. His other hand held a screwdriver. Not quite a weapon, but close enough. "Quiet," he hissed. His eyes darted between me and the window. "I don't want trouble. I just need your car keys." My hands trembled as I pointed to the counter. "There, please, just take them." He moved fast, snatching the keys, then looked at me once more. "You're lucky your dog listens." Then he was gone, the door banging open, footsteps fading into the night. The sheriff's cruiser showed up 20 minutes later, lights spinning blue across the dunes. Max was pressed against my leg the whole time, trembling but unhurt. Deputy Harris, a broad man with kind eyes, listened as I recounted every detail. "You said he didn't hurt you?" he asked. "No, just scared me half to death." He nodded, scribbling notes. "We've got reports of an escapee from the state penitentiary up in Tillamook. Could be your guy. We'll put out an alert on your vehicle." Rick got home at dawn. He wrapped me in his arms and didn't say a word for a long time. When he finally pulled back, his face was pale. "You could have been killed, Leah." I knew that. The thought kept replaying. How close he'd been, how easily it could have gone wrong. 2 days later, the police called. They'd found my truck 20 miles north, crashed against a guardrail. The driver was dead. Escaped convict named Daniel Boyd. Armed robbery, 2 prior assaults. For a long time, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside felt like footsteps returning. Max barely left my side, sleeping at the foot of the bed, growling at shadows. Rick took extra shifts so he could be home during the day, and I threw myself into work. Rescuing, healing, fixing. It was the only way I knew to quiet the noise inside my head. By summer, the nightmares had eased, but the fear lingered in small ways. Locking the car twice, checking the back door even when I knew it was shut. One afternoon, I was driving back from a rescue call, a pelican tangled in fishing line, when I realized I'd started taking the long route home without thinking. The crash site was on the main highway and I couldn't bring myself to pass it. At the center, people asked how I was doing. I always said fine. But fine was just a word. Rick tried to help, but he carried his own guilt. For not being there, for telling me to stay inside instead of coming straight home. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, he said quietly, "You know, it's not your fault. I keep thinking if I hadn't gone outside." He shook his head. "Leah, you didn't do anything wrong. You did what anyone would have done." Max lay between us, head resting on my foot, eyes half closed. I reached down and scratched behind his ear. He'd been different since that night. Calmer in some ways, more protective in others. The vet said trauma can change animals too. I believed it. The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and pine. I realized then that fear doesn't vanish. It just becomes something you learn to live beside, like the tide. Always there, rising and falling, but never gone. A year passed before I stopped flinching at sudden noises. By then, life had returned to its rhythm. Rescues, quiet evenings, the sound of the surf outside our window. We'd replaced the gate, installed motion lights, and finally adopted a second rescue dog. A timid husky mix named Luna. Max treated her like family from day one. Sometimes people ask why I didn't move after what happened. I tell them the truth, and because this is my home, fear doesn't get to take that from me. One autumn morning, I was walking both dogs along the cliffs when I met an older woman collecting driftwood. She smiled and said, "Beautiful dogs. You must feel safe with them." I hesitated, then nodded. "Safer than I used to." She laughed softly. "It's funny. Sometimes the ones we save end up saving us." Her words stayed with me long after she walked away. That night, as I sat by the fire with Max's head in my lap, I finally understood what she meant. The world isn't predictable. It can turn on you without warning. One moment calm, the next chaos. But the things we love, the living bonds we build, those are what pull us back from the edge. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's learning to move forward despite it. Leah discovered that strength isn't found in walls, locks, or distance, but in connection. To others, to the creatures we protect, and to the part of ourselves that refuses to surrender to fear. When I first moved to Boston, I wasn't looking for luxury. I just needed a place that didn't smell like mildew and was close enough to the subway that I could make it to my internship downtown without 2 transfers. The flat I found on Carver Street fit the bill. A narrow 1-bedroom tucked inside a 19th century brick building with tall windows and crooked floors. The kind of place that looked charming in the daylight and faintly haunted after dark. I was 27, fresh out of grad school, working part-time at a publishing house while trying to finish a collection of essays I hoped would get me somewhere. The rent was cheap because, as the landlord said with a laugh, old buildings have their moods. My upstairs neighbor, Mr. Leonard, everyone called him Lenoir because of his last name, was a retired music teacher. 70-something, soft-spoken, polite. He wore cardigans and smelled like pipe tobacco. On weekends, he played old jazz records late into the night. I didn't mind. The sound floated through the ceiling like a heartbeat. Steady, familiar, oddly comforting. For months, life was quiet. I worked, wrote, fed my cat Nora. The city was loud outside, but the apartment felt like a cocoon. I liked the solitude. Then one Friday in October, I noticed something strange. My mail, a small stack of bills and flyers, was already sitting on my counter when I got home. I remembered locking the door that morning. I told myself I must have brought it in earlier and forgotten. City life makes you paranoid, I thought. But the next morning, the curtains in my living room were drawn, and I hadn't touched them. By Monday, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been inside. I checked the locks twice before leaving for work and again when I came home. Everything looked normal, but the air felt off. Charged. Like static before a storm. That night, while I was in the shower, I heard it. Faint footsteps in the living room. Slow. Careful. The kind of sound that makes your body react before your brain can reason with it. I turned off the water, stood still, heart pounding. "Hello?" I called out. Silence. Wrapped in a towel, I crept into the hallway. The apartment looked empty, but when I reached the kitchen, I saw that the small bowl where I always kept my keys was empty. I tore through drawers, checked my coat pocket, under cushions, where nothing. I told myself maybe I'd left them in my bag, but I knew I hadn't. That night, I barely slept. Around 2 a.m., a soft tap, tap, tap started from the ceiling. Deliberate, rhythmic. Then, clear as day, a whisper, "Don't go to sleep yet." I froze. The voice was muffled but real. I stared up, unable to move. The next morning, my hands shook as I called the landlord. He laughed it off. "The pipes make weird noises," he said. "Old buildings, remember?" I didn't mention the whisper. Saying it out loud made it sound impossible. Days blurred together. I started leaving a light on in every room. Nora the cat hissed at the corners of the ceiling, sometimes pacing under one spot near the hallway. One evening, I decided to confront Mr. Leonard. Maybe the tapping was his doing. Maybe his record player or some creaky floorboard. I knocked on his door. He answered after a long pause, smiling faintly. "Camille, right? Everything okay down there?" "I keep hearing noises," I said. "Like footsteps or someone moving around. Do you—" His expression didn't change, but his eyes did, sharp for a split second before softening again. These old floors carry every sound. I try to keep the music low." I nodded, uneasy. "Thanks, just checking." That night, I pushed the couch under the spot where Nora always stared. I climbed up and tapped the ceiling. Hollow. When I pressed harder, the plaster flexed slightly, like there was a gap above it. My stomach dropped. There was space up there, a crawl space. I went to bed fully dressed, a flashlight on my nightstand. Every creak made me sit up straight. Around midnight, I heard it again in that same careful movement directly overhead. I'd had enough. The next morning, I called the police. 2 officers arrived, one young, one older, both skeptical. "Anyone else have access to your unit?" The older one asked. "Just the landlord and my upstairs neighbor." They inspected the locks, windows, then the ceiling. Near the hallway light fixture, the younger officer pointed. "There, see that line? A faint square outline, almost invisible unless the light hit it right. A hatch." They fetched a ladder from the cruiser and pushed it open. Dust fell like snow. The officer shone his flashlight into the darkness. "Jesus," he muttered. "There's a crawl space between the floors." He climbed up, disappeared for a moment, then called down. "You'll want to see this." Inside the narrow space were blankets, a flashlight, and a small camera. And on the other side, a hole cut through the wood directly above my bedroom. The officers went upstairs. I waited in the hallway, shaking. Within minutes, they came back with Mr. Leonard in handcuffs. Found a key ring with her apartment keys, one said quietly. He didn't fight, didn't even look surprised. As they led him past me, he said softly, almost kindly, "You should have kept the lights off. It's easier to sleep that way." The police later told me he'd been sneaking down through the attic for months, entering whenever I was out, sometimes while I slept. They found photographs of me taken from that hole in the ceiling. Shots of me reading, cooking, even sleeping. I moved out the next day, leaving everything behind except Nora and a suitcase of clothes. The landlord changed the locks and painted the apartment, but I never went back. For a while, I jumped at every sound. Showers felt unsafe. I kept every light on, every curtain shut. I learned what real fear feels like. Not screaming, not running, but the quiet kind that lives in your bones. I found another place eventually. Newer, brighter, with neighbors who actually spoke to one another. It took time, but I started to feel human again. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I still hear the faint echo of jazz in my head. That same rhythm from the ceiling. I tell myself it's just memory, not something real. Because if I've learned anything, it's that evil doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it comes wearing a cardigan, carrying old records and smiling through the floorboards. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, when the air shifts, when your gut tightens, it usually is. The world teaches us to be polite, to doubt ourselves rather than make others uncomfortable. But safety begins with belief in your own perception. If you feel watched, listen to that feeling. Fear, in the right measure, is not weakness, it's survival. When I was 8, my father told me the river behind our house could remember voices. If you spoke your secrets into the current, it would keep them forever, rolling them over the stones, whispering them to no one. I used to believe him. I'd stand at the edge, mud between my toes, and tell the water everything. That I wanted a dog, that I hated math, that I loved how my father's hands smelled like sawdust and tobacco. Years later, when he passed, I found myself thinking about that river again, how it never stopped moving, even when everything else did. I hadn't planned to go back. But my mother called one morning from the old house near Ipoh. Her voice sounded tired in a way I'd never heard before. "Farah," she said, "I can't handle it here alone anymore. The house is too big. We should sell it." I was 32 and living in Kuala Lumpur then, working in advertising, constantly tired and constantly pretending not to be. I told my boss I needed 2 weeks off and took the train north, carrying only a suitcase and the feeling that I was walking into a past I'd outgrown. The moment I saw the river again, I felt it. The smell of wet soil, the cicadas screaming from the trees, the slow hum of a place that hadn't changed in decades. But the town had. Half the neighbors were gone. The small shops were boarded up. There were rumors about break-ins, missing livestock, even a robbery that turned violent a few months before. When I pulled up to the house, my mother was waiting by the veranda, a little stooped but smiling. "You look tired," she said, brushing dust from my sleeve like I was still a child. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of camphor and rain. My father's armchair sat in the corner where he'd left it, its cushion worn into the shape of his shoulders. The walls were lined with old photographs, his fishing trips, my school awards, my parents' wedding portrait in sepia tones. That first night, we talked for hours. She told me about the offers she'd received, none good enough, and how the new families who'd moved nearby didn't stay long. "People say the river floods too easily," she said, lowering her voice. "And there's talk of thefts lately, boats coming at night." I laughed it off, but her eyes stayed fixed on the window. "It's different now, Farah. The river isn't what it used to be." At the time, I thought she meant the weather. The first night back, the humidity wrapped around the house like a wet blanket. I could barely sleep. I lay on my old bed, fan whirring overhead, listening to the night insects. Every sound seemed amplified. The croak of frogs, the rustle of palm leaves, the soft lap of water against the shore. Around midnight, thunder cracked across the hills. Rain followed, thick, violent, relentless. I closed my window before it could soak the curtains. That's when I heard it, a low, distant growl that wasn't thunder, steady, mechanical. It took me a few seconds to realize it was an engine, a boat engine. I sat up and peeked through the slats. Out on the river, a faint light wobbled, a flashlight or a phone. The silhouette of a small motorboat drifted slowly near the bank. 2 figures stood in it. I went to my mother's room. She stirred when I entered. "Mom, there's someone on the river," I whispered. She sat up, frowning. "Probably fishermen. They come sometimes when the tide's high." "In a storm?" She sighed, pulling her shawl tighter. "People need to eat, Farah. Go back to bed," I tried. But even after the thunder faded, I could still hear the soft drone of that engine. It didn't leave until almost 2 in the morning. The next morning, I mentioned it again. Mom poured tea and said quietly, "Your father used to help some men from the next village. They'd borrow his boat sometimes. Maybe it's them." But I noticed her hand shaking as she said it. 2 nights later, the storm returned, fiercer than before. The rain hammered the roof. The lights flickered twice before holding steady. I went to bed around 10, exhausted. At 1:47 a.m., a sound pulled me awake, a single creak, then another. It took me a moment to realize it came from the veranda. Then squelch, squelch, wet footsteps. I froze, every muscle tense. My phone sat on the nightstand, screen glowing faintly. I grabbed it, no signal. The storm must have cut the tower again. My heart pounded in my ears. I tiptoed to the window. Through the blur of rain, I saw them. 2 men, drenched, standing by the back door. Their clothes clung to them. One carried a flashlight, the other a crowbar. They were whispering. I couldn't hear much, but one phrase cut through. "The old woman's asleep. Take the jewelry." I backed away, stomach twisting. I ran to my mother's room, shook her shoulder. "Mom, wake up." She blinked, confused. "What is it?" "There are men outside." Her face drained of color. She didn't ask questions, just reached for my hand. "We'll hide. Under the stairs." The storage space beneath the stairs was small, built decades ago to store rice sacks during floods. We slipped inside and shut the wooden door, crouching in the dark. Then came the sounds. The door creaked open. Boots on the floorboards. Drawers opening. Metal clinking. Laughter low and mean. I could feel my mother trembling beside me. "They'll leave," I mouthed. She nodded, eyes glistening. Minutes dragged like hours. Finally, silence. We waited 5 more minutes before I dared to move. I eased the panel open, my legs shaking. The living room was a wreck. Drawers ransacked, mud smeared across the tile. And then I saw him. A man sat in my father's armchair, dry, calm, smoking. He looked up at me through the smoke. His voice was almost gentle. "You shouldn't have come back here." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My mother stepped beside me, her voice shaking. "Who are you?" "Get out of my house!" The man didn't move. He took another drag from his cigarette, eyes steady. "Your husband and I had a deal once," he said. "He promised things he couldn't give." I swallowed hard. "What deal?" He smiled faintly. "Doesn't matter now. But this place, it should have stayed quiet." "Please," my mother whispered. "Just go." He stood then, slow and deliberate. His wet boots left perfect prints on the old rug. "Your father was a good man," he said. "He just didn't understand that good intentions can ruin people." He dropped the cigarette in the ashtray, my father's ashtray, and walked toward the door. For a moment, lightning flashed, illuminating his face. It was lined, tired, older than I expected. When the thunder rolled again, he was gone. I rushed to lock the door, my hands shaking. "Mom, what was he talking about?" She sank into a chair, staring at the river through the rain-streaked glass. "Your father helped people after the flood," she said finally. "Families who lost everything. One man, he wanted more than help. He wanted a partnership. Your father refused. There was a fight. I thought it was over." "Who was he?" She hesitated. "His name was Rahim. He left after that night. I never saw him again." The power flickered, then went out. We sat there in the dark, the sound of rain swallowing everything. By morning, the police were there. 2 officers, polite but detached. They looked around, took photos, wrote notes. "No sign of forced entry," one said. "Could be the storm pushed the door loose." I told them about the man who spoke to us. They exchanged a glance. "Any idea who he might be?" I hesitated. "Maybe someone my father knew. His name might have been Rahim." One of them nodded slowly. "Rahim bin Hassan? He drowned in this river 8 years ago. Boat capsized during a flood." My mother's breath caught. "That can't be," the officer shrugged. "People talk. But we found his ID back then." When they left, I stood by the riverbank. The current was brown and fast, swollen from the rain. Near the waterline, a single cigarette butt rested on the mud, damp but unburnt. I bent down, staring at it. My father's brand. Behind me, Mom said softly, "Some debts never wash away." That evening, we packed our things. The house would be sold no matter the price. As we drove away, I looked back at the river one last time. The water shimmered in the fading light, calm now as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. Some places remember, some houses too. Coming home can mean more than returning to a place. It means facing what time has buried. The past, if ignored, has a way of waiting for us in silence. Never assume safety and familiarity. And never forget that the choices of one generation ripple through the next, like a river that never stops carrying what it's been given. The road to the cabin always felt longer in winter. Maybe it was the way the trees leaned over the highway like they wanted to keep you there. Or maybe it was just that silence that snow brings, that thick quiet you can't quite get used to. I hadn't been up there in nearly a year. After my wife Dana passed, I started renting the place out to tourists through a management company. It was easier that way. I didn't have to think about her coffee mug still sitting on the shelf, or the smell of her cinnamon candles still faint in the walls. But this year things had gotten strange. 3 days ago I got an email from the caretaker, or rather, an automated message that my last payment to him had bounced. I tried calling, no answer. I tried again the next day, still nothing. Then a neighbor from the nearest town, a man named Hal, called to say he'd seen smoke coming from the chimney. "That's odd," I said. Hal paused. "Yeah, considering the caretaker's been gone since November." So here I was, driving through a mountain pass with chains on my tires and a thermos of bad gas station coffee, wondering if I was about to find squatters, vandals, or something worse. The cabin sat near the tree line, tucked between pines, the kind of postcard place you'd expect to see on a Christmas card, or in a murder mystery. I built most of it with my father back in my 20s, long before Dana. After she died, I couldn't bear to sell it. When I finally pulled into the long, snow-covered driveway, I saw it immediately, bent smoke curling from the chimney. For a second, I felt relief. Maybe the caretaker finally decided to show up. But then I noticed the footprints leading from the porch, small, narrow, and recent. Someone was inside. The front door was unlocked. The hinges groaned as I pushed it open, and warm air rushed past me. That shouldn't have been possible. The power company was supposed to have shut off the electricity for the season. The fireplace was lit, wood crackled, and there she was. A woman sat on the couch facing the fire, her back straight, her hair tied in a messy knot. She was wearing one of Dana's coats, the red one with the shearling collar that I'd packed away after the funeral. She didn't look surprised to see me. "You're early," she said softly, almost like she'd been expecting me. I froze in the doorway. "Who are you?" She tilted her head, studying me. Her voice was calm, almost affectionate. "You said you'd come back for me." I felt something tighten in my chest. "Excuse me?" She smiled faintly and looked down at the table. Scattered across it were photographs. Me and Dana at the lake at our wedding on the porch of this very cabin. I hadn't seen those pictures in years. I thought I'd boxed them away. "How did you get in here?" I asked, stepping closer. "Where's the caretaker?" She didn't answer. Instead, she ran her fingers along the edge of one of the photos. "You shouldn't have left the door unlocked all those winters," she said, her tone suddenly sharper. "Things get in when you're not looking." Something in the way she said it made my skin crawl. I took another step forward, ready to demand answers. But when she looked up at me, the firelight caught her eyes, and for a fraction of a second I thought I saw something I recognized. Not her face exactly, but the way she was looking at me, like she knew every mistake I'd ever made. And then she stood, slow and deliberate. "You really don't remember, do you?" "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. Her smile flickered, then vanished. "You will." I must have blinked because the next thing I knew, the fire had burned low and the woman was gone. I called out, checked every room, even the back shed, nothing. But her footprints were on the floor, melting into wet streaks. The coat she'd worn was draped neatly over the arm of the chair. My pulse hammered. Maybe I'd fallen asleep standing up. Maybe the long drive and the lack of sleep were catching up to me. Still, I walked through the cabin room by room. Everything was in its place, and except for the photos. They were all laid out on the table, arranged like a timeline of my life with Dana. I sat down, staring at them. The last picture, one from our final trip before she died, had a faint smear on it like a fingerprint. Mine, hers, someone else's? The wind howled outside, shaking the windows. I pulled out my phone, but there was no signal. The power was weak, the lights dim. I stoked the fire again, more for comfort than warmth. That's when I heard it, the soft creak of a floorboard upstairs. I froze. There hadn't been enough time for anyone to climb the staircase since I'd checked. I grabbed the old snow shovel from beside the door and started up the steps, heart pounding. The bedroom door was open. The bed was made, the window cracked open slightly. Snowflakes drifted in on the wind. Then I saw the dresser drawer. It was open. Inside lay a folded piece of paper, and Dana's handwriting. "Don't let the winters take you too." I stared at it, confused. I hadn't seen her handwriting since before the accident. I didn't even remember leaving any notes here. When I turned around, the window slammed shut on its own. By morning, I decided I was leaving. Whoever that woman was and whatever was happening, and I didn't care. I loaded my bag, grabbed my car keys, and went outside. The air was sharp, the snow dazzlingly white. But my car wasn't where I'd left it. The tire tracks still led down the drive as if someone had driven it away. I looked back toward the cabin. The chimney was cold now, no smoke. No footprints except my own. Panic built in my chest. Maybe the woman had stolen it. Maybe she'd been real after all. I started walking down the mountain road, my boots sinking deep into the snow. It was several miles to the ranger station. The cold bit at my face, my lungs burning with every breath. After what felt like an hour, I saw it, my car. It sat idling at the edge of the ridge, driver's door open, engine running. I ran to it, shouting, "Hey!" No answer. The driver's seat was empty. The heater blasted on full. No footprints. None leading away, none approaching. Only snow falling softly, covering everything. I turned off the engine, shut the door, and leaned against the hood, trying to make sense of it. The world was silent except for the whisper of the wind through the pines. I looked up at the cabin far above me, just a dark silhouette against the sky. For the first time, I wondered if the woman had ever been there at all. The police found me a few hours later, walking down the main road with my hands numb from cold. I told them everything, the smoke, the woman, the photographs, the missing car. They sent a team up to the cabin. When they came back, their faces said it all. The place was empty, one officer said. No signs of anyone living there. No footprints either. Must have been covered by snow. I tried to protest, but the words felt hollow. They found the photos still on the table, though, and the note in Dana's handwriting. I half expected them to tell me I'd imagined that too, but they didn't. They just looked at me with a kind of wary sympathy. They gave me a ride back to town. A week later, I sold the cabin. I told the realtor I didn't want to know who bought it. I didn't care. But sometimes, when I can't sleep, I picture that night again. The firelight, the way the woman looked at me, the calm in her voice when she said, "You shouldn't have left the door unlocked all those winters." I used to think she meant it literally, that I'd left the cabin open, vulnerable. But maybe she meant me. Maybe she was right. Because when you leave parts of yourself unguarded, grief, guilt, regret, something always finds its way in. You can't outrun the past by locking the doors behind you. Grief lingers in the empty spaces we refuse to face. And if you ignore it long enough, it finds a way to speak. Through strangers, through memories, through the silence itself. Healing begins not in forgetting, but in returning, and finally choosing to listen.